is Roger, thanks for dropping by. This is part 2 of me having a very fast look at my potted orchids, minus derricks and minus the cooler shadier ones. I'll do those in another session sometime. But in part 1 we did everything like there, so all that. And what we're going to do in part 2 is all that, which will include the rest of the holy clay pots, other stuff, not derricks. So let's get going. They're getting a flush, so it makes life easy for me because I just keep topping up my bowl as I go along. Quite a few of these Cattleya types were in the project orchids, so they've recently been looked at, so they're not going to get much of a look at. My BC Maykay is still doing very little, but it does have some little green tips showing, so it has signs of life. It's a flipping good job because it really has been on borrowed time for some time. So we'll give that base a good soak, and we'll have a look at the moss. Yeah, the moss needs some water as well, but I don't pour the water through the moss into my bowl because it gets in all the other pots, so we just pour it on the floor basically. And then just pop that back on, so it just sits on that moss basically. So it's touching it, but not buried in it. This is Young Min Orange. It has 1 new growth, it has 2 new growths, it has 3 new growths. Right. I'd class that as recovering. It's not recovered by a long way. It's got hardly any roots at all, but it's got some viable ones. That's the important bit. And they're old and tired, but they're just about keeping these last couple of growths with leaves on okay. But 3 new growths down in there, that'll do for me because it means it will now recover. Slowly but surely, and it's not going to look like a good plant for a couple of years now, until all those old leaves die off. Right, this is, what is this? This is my apple blossom. Where's the tag gone? So again, older leaves on the oldest part of the plant going. We've got a strong new growth coming up here, and we have roots coming out all over the place. Quite honestly, I'd expect to see a second new growth on this at some point, but not yet. It hasn't started yet, let's put it that way. It might not, but it would be good if it did. But the roots are coming on now. When this was repotted, they weren't brilliant by any means, but there was enough there to keep the plant going, pending the new root system, which is now pushing on nicely. So, and there's no reason why that latest growth shouldn't bloom. Well, this is a little Shinfong Little Sun Young Min Orange. Suffered badly with the root loss, but currently has 2 nice new growths pushing on. The first one of which has started its roots, the second one will follow suit very soon. So again, I've got no worries about this recovering in full. The current set of leaves are a bit desiccated, apart from 1 pair of leaves on 1 growth which are still not desiccated and green. So there's going to be some root loss here, but we'll deal with that as and when. So I'm just checking because despite that treatment for scale being a bit vicious and certainly did the roots in on some of them, they're starting to come back. So we certainly won't be doing that again. That's not for me basically. Right, this is Angel Heart. I think if I threw this out in the garden it would still grow. Nice strong new growth, nice new roots, recovering nicely, having lost a complete new growth. That rotted, yeah? And that left it, you know, basically with a leafless bulb, shriveled, and a leaf on 1 bulb, shriveled. It's still growing. It's incredibly vigorous, this plant. As I said, I think if I just chucked it out in the garden, it would probably still grow till the winter comes. Frost wouldn't do it any good. have to mix up some systemic and give these another good go. So the trouble is with the Cattleyas, the systemic can't really get into the pseudobulbs and the rhizome. It can only get into the leaves, and then only partially, because they're so thick and leathery, and that's why scale is a pain in the proverbial on Cattleyas. Do you know what? I think that this is, to all extent, this plant is dead. This came from Jeff's. Root loss, rotted badly, is in a bad way, and would you believe it? That is a shoot. So it may recover. It's got a long, long way to go. Like I always say, if you can get a new growth on a Cattleya, you might have to wait for it to mature before your roots come, but they will come eventually. It's just got to hang in there until then. But on this plant, it's not quite so bad, simply because it has no leaves to support. It's got nothing to support. So, you know, the root system on this plant is less important. It needs to grow something with leaves on, so that it can feed itself. Anyway, that's that one. Now this is just a no ID hybrid, but again, it virtually lost its root system. But we've got a nice new growth coming up here, and another nice new growth coming up here. So again, the root system will be replaced in the not too distant future. In fact, it started on one of those growths. And I don't know what my logic was, but this Cattleya's got cocoa husk in it. I'd have to go back to the repotting video and listen to me telling me why I did that, because I've forgotten. Must have been a reason. Might have just been to get some extra hydration around the roots, because there weren't any. In other words, try and encourage some root growth with a bit of extra moisture. Can't think of anything else. There. Right, water. This is Laelia anceps. Coming on, basically, new growths. This one didn't suffer from root loss as a result of root treatment. It suffered from some root loss due to repotting and dragging it out of the holy clay pot, because obviously some of the roots stayed behind, is a polite way of putting it, and refused to let go. Consequently, there was root damage. So the root loss was for a totally different reason on this one. But these new growths are starting to produce roots now. So, and it hasn't lost its leaves, it's still got nice green leaves. So, you know, that plant is fine. And still has no signs of scale. This is my other purpurata that did have a bit of root issues. The pseudobulbs are now badly desiccated. The leaves are desiccated and yellowing, apart from this one. And we have a new growth, singular, at the moment. So this is going to take a long time to get back to anything that might bloom. It's lost all its strength now due to lack of roots. It will recover them eventually, but it's going to take time now. The Laelia purpuratas to bloom need to be like right up there with their health. Need to be bursting with it, basically. And if they're a bit slack on roots, or not enough leaves, or you know, in any shape or form a bit weak, or weaker than they should be, then they'll probably just not bloom. They'll probably grow okay, but they won't bloom. I can't believe that that's actually starting to bloom. Right, actually I'll stop the camera there because I've got some things to move around, and then we'll carry on from when I pick the next pot up. Right, start off with that. It's another one of my pinguiculas. Quite honestly, this is going to have to come out of the pot. It's overflowing, and the problem is when they push on like this, they will often lift themselves off your media, and then the roots don't do so good, and you don't even know, because you can't see any media because the plant's actually taken over. But this is grown really well, this one. Doesn't bloom very often, but you know, a lovely big rosette there, and two new ones pushed up there. So yeah, that's a nice plant. Only ever gets water, no feed, and this time of year it gets plenty of it. It can be standing in water for a while before it uses it up. Heavy on the water for those little beasties this time of year. Right, onto this shelf. Victoria Regina, currently in bloom, with a camera that's probably going to show that as purple instead of close to blue. They're classed as blue, but they're not really. But I've got blooms. So after years of trying to get one of these and have these blooms in my grow space, we will now get them on a regular basis. Because this blooms on and off, it doesn't really have a season. So it's currently blooming off the end of a leaved cane, which means that cane is now capable of blooming. And it can still bloom on the older canes, even though it's already done it once. Yeah. Right. That's the Kiki off of Prima Donna, with its new growth pushing on. And roots progressing, but slowly. And I think they will be aided and abetted by putting a bit of media over the top of them now. Give them a feeling of getting into something. That. And this is a struggling Latoria type. I bet there's scale on it. I don't think there's any new ones. I think there's dead ones. But this plant went down when it got treated with a systemic insecticide, and it's never really got going again. It's actually Formidable. It's a primary cross, but it really didn't like the systemic, and it also doesn't like the scale, which, you know, when you can't give them a flipping good go with a systemic, it's difficult to get rid of the scale. But there's a lot less on here than there have been in the past, and this growth is just about hanging in there, and it has a lovely strong new growth coming up in the middle. So it's sort of, and that growth is producing some roots, so it's sort of coming back. It hasn't long been repotted. What I was repotting was debatable because it didn't have any roots. It just had old tired, like, so I got water in there. Crown, gotcha. Once the fans come back on, that would dry, but not worth the risk. Not when the plant's struggling. What is this? Oh, this is my Latoria Alexandrae. New growth's progressing nicely, pushing on. Recently repotted, new roots just starting. And they were slow. I had to take a risk with this one. The media was starting to get very iffy. And I thought we'll do more harm leaving it in the old media than we will repotting it a little early before the new roots start. So it's had to wait for its new roots, but they're coming now, so on their way. And this, this was done with Michael McCarthy's advice again. This is my delicatum, and I said I was waiting for a new growth to repot, and he said, oh, you don't want to wait for that. Just get on with it. The new growth will come in any minute now, and the new roots will probably start before the new growth comes. Well, there's the new roots, and there's the new growth. So that should push on and generate a reasonable root system now. This is yet to bloom. I mean, I got it as a single cane Kiki off of Sarah at a show. It was along the lines of getting towards the end of the show, and she still had quite a few lying around, and I just basically said, you don't want to take them home, do you? She said, oh, go on then. She said, I'll have to have something for it. I think I gave her £1 for it or something. Anyway, this is Thai Angel Correction. It's Thai Angel with what looks like 2 spikes. It's on a very old cane. But what we haven't got at the bottom is roots and a new growth yet. we'll see what this does. The blooms are quite large for a Phalaenopsis type dendrobium, and they last a very long time. Well, its last new growth has got good leaves, so it's got some strength, and I've just seen at the very, very base of that last new growth is a nubbin. But whether that's a new root or a new shoot, I don't know. But a couple of weeks' time we'll tell, you know. It's called patience. Now you, I'm going to have to deal with that one. Oh. This one's got loads of scale on the base, and it's all round the base of the plant. But if you look at this one, they're on the leaves too. Now this is a black hair type. It's going to object to a systemic. Your alternative is to manually remove them constantly so that they never get chance to breed. Yeah? They never get, those little crawler stages never get chance to form an official scale, you know, the actual limpet type thing, which is where the eggs are produced for the next generation. So if you keep at it, I'm just rubbing these off with my fingers because I don't want to put a systemic on these leaves. But you've got to get them all. No, and the trouble is they will get down in the leaf joints. You probably won't get them all. I was going to say there was a little cloud of scale then. So I'm going to have to put some on because I need something. I know it's going to get all over my fingers, but I need something to wipe these off with. And what better than the actual systemic spray, which as I wipe the leaves with my thumb, any that I miss will still get some on them and die. But I just got a little cloud of them, fell off the leaf as I moved it. Now they've all gone down on the floor. Hopefully they won't get on any other plants, but that's how they can spread. They're light as a feather when they're at this stage, and they will fall off your plant if you knock it about and go on the one next to it. Right, so that's the plant done. Oh, a couple up there too. That's the plant done. I think I've got them all, but you know, I'm going to put this back near the front. Now what I've got to do here is try and water it without getting the base of the plant wet. The reason being I'm going to spray it. Well, if I spray it after I've got it wet, I'll have diluted the chemical with the water that watered the plant. Now most of the roots are around the edge of the plant, so but you might not be able to see it, but this is the level of scale at the base of the plant. It's quite heavy on this plant, and then I shall just soak, absolutely soak the base of the plant. That's hardly likely to soak into the plant at all. So it's just hopefully going to drown. It'll drown them if it doesn't kill them chemically. And then there's some on this old cane here. Again, there's no leaves. So I'm just using it as a contact killer at the moment. But we'll give it a good go. Oh, those two canes are okay. We'll give it a good go. Right, so now I need to rearrange that shelf because I want that plant at the front, because I'm going to be looking at that every couple of days now to make sure that I keep on top of those. It's one that falls over really easily. Right, so the only other one on this shelf is this one. That has signs of a slug, and the slug is in there and it's dead because it's got a slug pellet. That's what we like to see. So yeah, the new growth pushed on. It's not got up to the full size yet, and I think I'm going to have to take this out of the pot simply because I don't know what's in that pot and it's massive. So you know, I don't give this much water. It just gets a little bit because I don't know what's happening. You know, that could be absolutely soaking wet in the bottom of that pot. It does actually have some weight to it, but you won't worry about it now. Go back up there. I said, is slight rearrangement of that shelf because I want this plant at the front. So I need to get on top of that scale on there. And as I said, that that might be that we get the alcohol out, with cotton wool buds, and just go over it frequently, deal with it. And eventually there will be none left, but there could still be some eggs. So you still got to keep your eye on it. And the problem is with scale, they won't go away. Well, this type of scale, the Bois Duval scale. There are other types of scale, but this is the worst one by far. Trust me to get that. I've probably got the other sort as well. Ordinary scale, they're not a worry. Well, not as much. They are a worry. All scale is a worry, but not as much. But scale don't go for dendrobiums that much. They go for cattleyas and oncidium types in the main, but they will go for the black hair type dendrobiums. They love them, and they're the ones that really don't take kindly to systemics. It's catch-22. The answer is don't have any. Then you haven't got the problem. Right, finish my coffee. I doubt if I got any spray in there, but who knows? Shouldn't joke about chemicals, really. Radiata, two nice spikes coming up on this. Hasn't long gone out of bloom, so these are in addition. More water. Now again, because this hasn't been repotted, some of that bark looks a little dark below the surface. It gets a little bit. It just gets a trickle, because I don't know what's in the pot. But it does have a new growth coming that's pushing on. That will produce new roots soon. So I might take the risk and repot that while it's in bloom. Personally, I've never had a problem. I had a Phalaenopsis blasted some buds once by repotting it when it was in bloom. It didn't drop blooms, it dropped some buds. But as far as repotting plants in bloom, I've never had a problem with it. Providing they've got reasonable roots, because obviously if they haven't got good roots and they're supporting blooms and you repot them, there's a little too many items of stress there on the menu. So that would be the best of ideas. What am I watering here? This is Anachilium pachycephalum. It's one of Jeff's plants. Never heard of it. Be nice to see some blooms and see what the hell it looks like, but never heard of it. Right, back to the holy clay pots. Searching for scale, always. There's a few round the base of this one. This is the only red Cattleya I've got. We've got a nice new growth there, and an even nicer one round here. But we do have a bit of scale around the base. So again, I will try and water the plant without getting the base of the plant wet, so that I can then run some of that chemical down the canes, down onto the base of the plant. And as I say, I won't get them all, but you just keep at it, keep niggling at them, stop them getting a real hold. So just let it run down the canes onto the rhizome. And as I said, that is doing nothing as far as a systemic chemical is concerned, because it just can't soak in at that part of the plant. But it's a contact killer, so you can use it as a contact killer without the need for the systemic. But on things like oncidiums, obviously it works systemically very successfully, because it will soak into the leaves successfully. What have we got here? Taiwan Good Life Big Wilson. This is one came from Schwerter that I actually bought. Lovely new growth, roots everywhere, doing okay. Never had scale. Doesn't mean to say it won't get any though. It's in the vicinity of others. They will move. So like I say, you just got to keep your eye out, keep on top of them. And in fact, I've just seen some, again, on the oldest, weakest pseudo bulb that's starting to shrivel. And they're in one of their favourite places, the leaf joint. Right down in that little gathering there. So again, we'll just spray that, let it run down that pseudo bulb. Don't see any others anywhere. Just have to keep at it. And then this one is going downhill fast. Are you going to recover? Well, there's a new growth on there, and the new growth and the base of that rhizome is covered in scale. Well, it's not going to recover very well with that, is it? This is not doing well. It's got no good leaves, lost its roots, and the area with the new growth is now covered in scale. So we will, again, water round the base, not on it. They're just in that one place. Again, they're going for the new growth, and it's a weak plant. So we'll see what we can do with that. But again, being a contact killer, we can get the whole base of that rhizome and the new growth absolutely soaking wet with the contact killer. If the spray don't get them, they'll drown. Make sure it runs down underneath the rhizome. Even though you can't see it, that's where they'll be. Right, that's that shelf done. Not many plants on that shelf. It has room for more. But I don't know what to put up there at the moment. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is put these two big ones up there now. So these are the ones in the feeding project, which we're ignoring today because it's a flush. So this is Miltonia spectabilis. Well, that's going to need some more water. It's a big pot. These take a lot of watering, these do. Spikes are pushing on nicely on this. There's 4 spikes, 1 on each new growth. It's going to be a nice show. So we'll get that drowned. It's in drinking mode at the moment because the new growths are still actively growing. They haven't matured. It's pushing out new roots and it's producing spikes. That is now drinking. So we will put that up there. And then this is one of Derek's. I'm not going to water that, but the blooms have gone. So I have to take the spike off, update my notes, and put that with the rest of Derek's plants to be picked up tomorrow. I thought that shelf looked odd. There's always been 10 plants on that shelf, which makes the pots look, well, they're a pattern, 2 rows of 5, and one of them only had 4. Right, so that's the Pabstia. Bloom's still looking good. Not long been repotted. Good roots, but starting to dry. Not dry, starting to dry. At which point it gets drowned. So good soak for that one. That gets us round to the next big one that can go up on that other shelf. Again, spikes pushing on nicely on this. This is the Morliana, or probably Morliana cross. This one's growing spikes, maturing growth and pushing up new growth. So it's just doing everything and growing roots. At this point in time, at this time of year, this plant should never dry out. But unfortunately it hasn't long been in this pot. The media is still relatively new, and that was very, well, I wouldn't say it was very dry, but it was drier than perhaps it ought to have been. So, right, so let's check those two big ones up there. Give them a bit more light as well. That gives me quite a large shelf, and some of these on this display area can now go over here. This Zygo, this is my original one. New roots pushing on. Old roots okay. Looks like a giant pot, this one, but with the massive air cone and the ventilation, it doesn't stay wet long. It's going to have to stay. It's going to stay where it is because I want the light. The light will creep round the edge of that big pot that I've just put up there. Apart from coming down from the roof, obviously. Right, so that's that. Right, we'll do this lower shelf, which is the Rossio Glossum, which is a pain in the arse putting it in and out of that shelf because of the leaves, but the new growths on here are successfully rooting, which means this plant should start plumping up a bit now. There's some good roots, nice thick fleshy roots getting down into the pot, more to come from that second new growth. So this is not going to go downhill anymore. It has done. The bulbs have lost some of their plumpness, but they didn't completely shrivel. So what happened on this was the lovely set of new roots I had, a slug took them off. I lost that set of roots. So obviously I've been waiting for new growths to actually start some more roots, which is now what's happening. So lost the opportunity for blooming this time round, but there'll be other times. If the plant is saved, there will be blooms another time. If you lose the plant, you don't see the blooms. Although that's obvious, sometimes it's worth saying. Save the plant. Blooms will come again. What am I working here? Now this is just a Cambria type intergeneric hybrid, but it's growing well. It's producing lots of new roots, and it's got 1, 2, 3 new growths on it, all of which should bloom down the line. So that's that one, and there's one more on this shelf. These are all biggies down here. And this one is a Bialara, allegedly. It's got a proper name, Memoria Donald Yamada, and it has a new growth and it is swelling up, which means if it was going to bloom it probably would have done it by now, so I don't think it is. So we'll probably have to wait for a second new growth on that one. It didn't have very good roots when it was repotted. That new growth has pushed up some more, but not a lot. This is not a big rooter. Seems to be reluctant to go mad with the roots. But they're there. There's enough to keep it hydrated. And it's almost finished growing. That bulb has still got a bit of maturing to do, but its main growth period is over now. So I have to put these in at a funny angle. You sort of in through the hole in the shelf above and drop them down in, because they won't go in like from their shelf because there's a bar in the way. Well, why don't you take the bar out, idiot? Oh, I can't do that now. It's decided it's going to stay. But I could take that bar out. That would mean I could just push these in and out without having to struggle. And this one, every time I move this one, I have to hold the plant because it's still slightly wobbly. It will stabilise now that it's producing new roots, but it will take time. It's not going to happen overnight. I have to wiggle the leaves around because they're so sturdy, the leaves on this. They have to get threaded in amongst the other leaves. Right, so that's that. There is room for a couple of smaller pots on that shelf, quite honestly. Right, so this big thing that's not in bloom, you can go right up the back. We don't need to look at you right at the front, do we? What else can we put up here? The brassica, quite honestly, I think today I'm going to take these spikes off, because although this one here hasn't quite finished yet, this one has, and it's pushing up its new growths now. So it would be nice to put the energy into those new growths, and if I take the spikes off I can put the plant on another shelf, because at the moment I'm stuck with it here and it's sort of in the way. So we'll have these giant spikes off today. They've lasted quite well, I've been quite pleased. So we've done well, and even though this spike is coming off a little early, there's probably only a couple of days left on that spike, quite honestly. Then it would be gone anyway. So we'll put the energy into the new growths. The more energy that goes into the new growths, the better the root system, and the better the spikes will be next time round. Cane's out. I suppose we better water it. As I said, no rest for the wicked. I mean, this one's actively, you've got two new growths right next to each other there, another one there, and another one round here. So from the 4 new growths, we have 4 new growths. So 1 on each. And on the 4 new growths last time, we had 2 spikes. Let's see if we can do better next time. Those of you that remember those sort of things, because I don't. So from 4 new growths we had 2 spikes. Let's see what we get next time round. Right, so now where can you go? I think you might have to just, I want this over there against that glass, but I can't do it now because I've just done all those. Right, so that's that one up in there, but that needs to go in brighter light than that. Now, I think we'll put this one up there. I'm probably going to lose this plant. I know that might seem odd, bearing in mind it's just bloomed, but it has no roots, and the bulbs are shrivelling like nobody's business. I suppose, strictly speaking, I'll just take the spike off. And there's some scale right at the base of that pseudo bulb. That might be what's hindering it. Again, that'll be the first sign of scale on this, because this is I haven't had this plant long, but the blooms are very nice. So we'll hang on to them for a bit longer, and then we pour our water into a pot that effectively has no roots. The plant has no roots. We will see what it does, but we'll get it up there so that we can enjoy those blooms a bit longer. And then the this is Encyclia lancifolia, first blooming for me, came from Jeff's assortment. It's growing roots, it's actually putting down some nice roots now, and we've got 2 nice spikes. So it's in a tiny little pot, so at some point at the base of the 2 bulbs that have the blooms on, there are 2 eyes that look like they're just starting to move, but I doubt if I'll be able to get this in close because they are quite small. But they are the typical cockleshell style, octopus style blooms, so upside down. The lip forms like a hood. See if I can get that one to focus on that one. So very attractive, and they should be fragrant. Yes, they are. Actually, that's nice. It's very faint, but then we've got no sun in here today, which is good because I'd be roasting if we did have. Right, it was the radiata that was up on that shelf, so we will move that one along, and move that one along, and we'll get radiata back up where it was, which is up in that little bit there. Yeah, that's good. Right, Pabstia, that needs to come back up here. Yeah, that's a nice little group there, with the dendrobium hanging down as well. Right, 2 more to go, and one of those is a Masdevallia that came from Mick, and although I'm not doing the cooler, shadier ones, This is a recent repot, and it's a Masdevallia, so it shouldn't dry out, so it's going to get some water. It's not with the cooler, shadier ones at the moment because it's in bloom. But this has got new growths. I suspect it's got a reasonable root system coming from Nick's. It's certainly a good sized division. And I can see signs of white roots around the base of the plant, so I think for once I'm going to have a Masdevallia that pushes on quite nicely, because I started with a good one. A lot of my Masdevallias in the past were just poor plants with virtually no roots, and I couldn't get them going. Beautiful bloom on that. Inca Prince, that is. And then last but not least is this, another black hair type, Infundibulum. Now, I've been told off for calling that Infundibulum. Trace Sanders has been growing orchids for an incredibly long time. He's Australian, even though he trades in England, goes around the big shows and everything. And in his speech, his talk that he did to us for the Orchid Society, he called it Infundibulum. Yeah? Which is what I used to call it. And I didn't think to sort of say, is he mucking about, you know? Anyway, whatever, it's a black hair type and it's got scale. They love them. But it's just a few on a couple of leaf joints. So it's not a panic yet, as long as I keep on top of them. So I've just taken the oldest two blooms off because they've gone now, turned to paper. And we've got a nice strong new growth pushing up here, and on the new growth is where you see how this plant gets its name, the black hair. That's where you can see it, because as the canes age, they get these sheaths on them and there's no black hairs left, although round the base there often is. So this one still hasn't come out of its pot since I got it, but it's in Burnham's medium bark. So I don't see any rush. It makes you wonder where the scale came from to get on this one, unless they were already there. Must admit, I've never seen scale at Burnham's, but then I don't go round looking for them. Right, so that's that one. You can stay up in the corner there, and the Masdevallia can just tuck in there so that I can see it. That's just out of the line of fire of the big circulating fan, because obviously that close to the circulating fan it would dehydrate the plant. It'd be too much for it. Right, so that's my pots done for today. The rest of the pots, which is Derek's and the cooler, shadier ones, will get done on another day, but they're not due for a while because they haven't long been done, so it won't be like straight away. So that was part 2, a brief look at the rest of my pots. How long's that video? Oh, just over half an hour. That's about right for this type of chatty looky type video. And thanks for dropping by. See you next time.